Everyone. Hello, friends. My name is Mary Del Hayes. I'm with the Together SC team, and I am so glad that you are here with us. Go ahead and drop your name and organization and where you are in the chat so we can all kind of see each other and connect. We will be getting started shortly. We are recording this session for those who are very eager for this information, and I know we all are because it is certainly a challenging time to be a manager or an employer, and we are really honored to bring this space together and welcome you and connect you with some of the incredible experts that we get to work with in our consultant collaborative. And we hope that you benefit from your time here with us today. Whether you are a long-term manager or a new manager trying to figure things out, we can all certainly use a little help along the way. And gosh, it's exciting to see so many friends here. Hey, Alexis, I see you too. And let's see, it is 10:02. I'm going to pop a little poll question up. Feel free to answer as you're getting settled in. We want to know how many times you have ever had to let someone go. And so this will give us just a little bit of an idea. We know this is one of the most nerve-wracking parts of being a manager. You're concerned about liability. You're concerned about the well-being of the person who is having a really terrible day now on your watch. And we are really excited. When we were talking about this workshop, we were like, well, what order do we go in? And somebody said, do you know what? We should put terminations first, because that's what people spend the most time thinking about, even though it's what they should spend the least time actually doing. And so we thought that if we started our HR hot seat with terminations, that might give you a little confidence and ease your mind so that we can think about the things that all of us should really be investing our time in, which is recruiting, onboarding, and most importantly, retaining our employees. And so we're going to give another couple of seconds for this poll question. I'm excited to show you the results. It's always fun to see a little poll question. If you're like me, you grew up in the era of getting magazines to your house and you would flip through and do those decision trees, or, do one of those polls that says, what does your favorite color say about your personality? So I always love a poll question. And with this, I am going to turn over the results and let's share. It looks like a handful of us have never terminated somebody, but most of us have either terminated a few times, or we've got a handful of people who are super seasoned experts who have let folks go more than 5 times. And so whether you're here and you're looking for that ease of mind, or whether you are here to make sure your skills stay sharp, we are really excited to be with you today, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kelly Holl with Willis HR, and I'm going to pin her. I'm going to find her slides, and we are going to get the show underway, and assuming I can find the slides, that is. How do they always disappear right when you need them?
Murphy's Law. Good morning, everyone.
Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself? And then surely I'll have the slides up by then.
Sure. My name is Kelly Hall. I'm a senior consultant with Willis HR. We are here in Columbia, South Carolina, and do HR consulting for just about any of the specialty areas. My specialty happens to be employee relations and compliance. And today we're going to talk a little bit about tactful terminations, and really just how to have as smooth a termination discussion or meeting as you possibly can. They're always going to be difficult. I've been doing this for 30 years and I still get a lump in my throat before each of the meetings, and I feel strongly that we should. But there is a way to, there are different things that you can do to prepare, and different tips and tricks and best practices that'll make your life a little bit easier as you go through this inevitable aspect of employment.
Here we go.
Okay. I think we're ready for the first slide. So today we're just going to talk a little bit about, covering your bases, making sure that you're prepared, how we support our managers, or the support that we need, really, and things to think about. The actual meeting, how to avoid surprises and prepare for the unknown. Just some reminders about respect and controlling the environment. Then we'll talk a little bit about offboarding, which is essentially after the meeting and what happens. And then at the end, if anyone has any questions, hopefully we can talk a little bit more about it at that time. Next slide. So first things first, obviously, when you get to the point of a termination meeting, you've done your homework. Some things that I recommend is always just to be prepared. If you are not wholly familiar with the circumstances, and again, there are multiple reasons why you would find yourself having a termination meeting or discussion with an employee. If it's a performance-related issue, I would encourage you to familiarize yourself with any prior disciplinary discussions, any corrective actions, any specific situations, especially if this is a termination that's the result of a zero tolerance policy. So you're going to be bringing something to an employee's attention at the same time that you're notifying them that they'll be leaving the organization. That's a tricky one as well. So just taking the time before the meeting to make sure that you have all of the information that you need about the discussion and about the circumstances around the termination will help you feel more confident going into the meeting, that you're not going to get blindsided with a question that you don't know the answer to, or challenged on maybe your reasoning or any of the information that you're prepared to share with them. There's nothing more awkward than having an employee push back on your reasoning in a termination meeting. Next slide. So manager support, this is really about, for yourself as well as for your managers as they go through this. Sometimes it's helpful to role play the termination meeting in advance. You can offer different potential scenarios. You can discuss different outcomes. You likely have a personal or somewhat personal relationship or knowledge of this person, and you know what to expect. It is not uncommon that someone reacts in a way that you don't expect, and you need to be prepared for that as well. And sometimes just a mock discussion will be helpful to the overall discussion to begin with. I would suggest writing out a script, maybe some bullet points, so that you can, just be thinking about how you want to open the discussion. I strongly suggest that you're brief and direct with the messaging. It is very easy, because it's an uncomfortable situation, to start talking and trying to fill the silence. But the truth is that most employees don't hear much of what you say after you notify them that they're being terminated. So while you'll still go over information like a final paycheck, when their benefits end, how to file any outstanding reimbursement claims, COBRA, they're probably not going to hear too much of that detail. So you want to be prepared to be brief, allow them the chance to get on out of there if they're not handling it well, and then making sure, obviously, that they've got follow-up information for who they can contact later for additional questions. But having some bullet points and being prepared with your messaging before you walk into the room will help you stay on track. As far as scheduling the meeting, I always suggest that we do it as early as possible in the workday. And I would also like to recommend that you consider doing the meeting as early in the work week as possible, depending on the circumstances. Primarily because the termination meeting leaves people feeling somewhat helpless. And when you do a termination at 1 o'clock on a Friday, by the time someone gets home and has their wits about them, and they start thinking about, I need to get my resume in order, I need to reach out to an agency, I need to register with Indeed, all of the things that come after a meeting like that. when it's Friday at 5, they're somewhat paralyzed until Monday, and they're not able to make any forward movement. And so I suggest doing them early in the day and early in the work week to give employees a chance to immediately start that pivot into their transition, because the overall outcome of the meeting will be far more successful if the employee feels like they have some control. Obviously, again, you want to think about the person that you're talking to and make sure that you're prepared for their response, the one that you anticipate, as well as the one that you may not. If you think for any reason that there is the potential for violence, I would suggest that you have security. You can certainly contact a local agency. You may have some at your facility. I do not recommend going into those meetings alone anyway, but if you think that there is the opportunity for the situation to escalate, be prepared for that. You also want to be sensitive to the location that you have the meeting. I always recommend that we escort people from the building as soon after the meeting is done versus letting them, collect their things and have that awkward experience standing at their desk and pulling their things together. You can offer to pack their things up for them after hours. They can come back and do it before or after work. You can pack up their things and ship them to them, but helping them to avoid any additional uncomfortable situations is always going to be appreciated. So identifying a location that will allow them to get out of the building or out of the office as privately as possible, things like that, those considerations, they'll be noticed and appreciated. I always recommend that you have a witness. That can be a colleague, a peer. Typically, I would recommend another manager is with you, HR if you have HR at your organization. Certainly something you can reach out to for additional support from a consultant as well. But having someone, a third party that is just listening to everyone is going to be helpful when you go to do your notes or if you have to reflect on the meeting later. Okay, and then just avoiding confusion and distraction. Ooh, can you go back one for me? Just avoiding confusion and distractions. Having a plan, again, I can't tell you how important it is to just have a plan and know what your intent is going into the meeting. You also want to make sure, very similar to progressive discipline recommendations, you want to make sure that we are consistently handling terminations the same way. Do we normally escort people directly from the building, or do we allow them to pack up their things? If you don't have a reason not to allow this person to do the same thing that another person would have been allowed to do, you want to think through why that is. Again, progressive discipline, it's just crossing your T's and dotting your I's, making sure that you've done all of your homework and that you've got the documentation that you want to have on file should any of your actions be questioned. Direct and brief. The decision is final one is key. I noticed that there was about 25% of us who have done these, unfortunately, more often than a couple of times. It's not uncommon for the conversation to shift into negotiation mode, where the employee starts to bargain with you or try to discuss the decision. The decision when you walk into a room to do a termination meeting is a final decision. It should be a final decision. And if it's not, then you're probably not prepared to be having that meeting. It's not something that we should be discussing or negotiating at the 11th hour. It is okay to simply say, I understand and appreciate your feedback, and I'm sorry that we're here, but the decision has been made and it is final. And get back to your script. Okay, next slide. Again, controlled environment, paying attention to your setting. You want to make sure that it's a private location. A lot of this seems logical, but terminations are stressful for everyone involved. And you forget things like you want to be sitting in the chair that's closest to the exit door. You want to make sure that there's nothing in between you and being able to get out of the room, again, for safety reasons. You don't know how this person's going to respond. There's also health-related issues that have happened in termination meetings, and you want to be able to quickly get help if you need it. So thinking through things like where the meeting is it private? Is it quiet? Do I have access to an exit? Do I have access to another individual if I need help? Thinking through things like that in the setting prior to the meeting, you'll be glad that you did. And then just respectful communication. This is the one where I remind us that we hope to never be in the same situation, but treating people the way that we would want to be treated in a situation like this will help guide you in terms of tone and body language, maintaining a respectful dialogue throughout the conversation is the right thing to do. It's an unfortunate situation. No one wants to be there. You are directly impacting someone's life, whether it's through fault of their own, or it's a company restructuring, or the department's being outsourced. There's a million reasons you could be sitting there. It doesn't change the fact that you are about to do something that is very impactful to people emotionally and personally. It's going to impact them financially. It's going to have a lasting impact. And you want to be remembered as someone who was compassionate and someone who was respectful. And it's a lot easier for someone to pick up the phone and call you later with questions, which you want to encourage them to be able to do if they felt like they were respected in the meeting. And sometimes it's difficult, especially if you're sitting across from someone who you've spent the last 6 months doing corrective actions and coaching and really trying to get them to a place where they would be successful. And unfortunately, you're not going to get there. There can always be some frustration on your part. And that's a completely human reaction. We need to remember to check that at the door, because now is not the time to be discussing how you were impacted by the experience. You certainly don't want them to feel like this is personal. Next slide. So once you've had the meeting and you have shared with the employee that the news about their jobs has gone away, there's going to be several things that need to happen. If you have any paperwork that you need to share with the employee, some states, we don't in South Carolina, but some states like Georgia have a required form that you need to provide to terminated employees. Some organizations will provide employees with information on unemployment, on final paychecks. They even have checklists. It's really however you handle it internally. But you'll want to have that with you. You want to make sure that you'll have 2 copies so that you have one, you can give one to the employee and walk them through it. You also want to make sure that you've communicated with IT, with security, or any other relevant departments that need to know that this termination is taking place. Hopefully you have some protocol in place. If you don't, it's probably a good time to start thinking through it. But you should have a plan when it comes to terminations, whether it's resignations, terminations for cause. You'll want to make sure that you've got a plan for network access, building access, and how to secure those things prior to the meeting. You'll want to make sure that you review with them, things that we taught, final paycheck, benefits, all of that, as well as instructions for their final belongings, talking with them about how do you want to get company property back to us if they have any at home. In a largely remote environment these days, it's not uncommon for someone to have equipment at home that needs to be picked up. Also talking about any personal belongings that they might have at the workplace that they need to collect, how you're going to get those back to them. So you want to review all of that before they leave. You'll collect any company equipment they have with them at the time, keys, corporate credit cards, badges for a building, And you'll want to make note of what was collected so that you can record that in the termination file. And then lastly, I strongly suggest that terminated employees are escorted if they are going back to their desk to collect a purse or a set of keys or even just a few personal belongings, that they are escorted from the meeting back to their desk, or that they're escorted straight out of the building, but they should not be alone inside the building after the notification has been made. And really, it's not because we assume that everyone's going to do anything. We don't want to put anyone in a situation where they're not thinking real straight or clearly, and they make a decision that they probably wouldn't make in another environment. So you just stay with them, no access to computers, let them grab their things and walk them out of the building. It's the best practice for just about any of these situations. All right, and I have, I think, 6 minutes. Does anybody want to toss out any questions? Is there any feedback?
We've got some questions, Kelly. So
yay.
I'm excited to feed you some of these. One of them is, can you give a reference for someone that you have fired?
Sure. I think that one, you want to be familiar with whatever your company policy is. Many companies are verification of information only. Some companies, let's say that you have a layoff or a position elimination, it's a no-fault termination, but regardless, the person has left your organization. If they were a strong performer and you want to write a letter of recommendation for them to take with them going forward, that's certainly a nice gesture. I would recommend that you review it with HR or have someone in HR or legal review anything that's more personal before sending it out, only because, you know, we all know the climate today, and you certainly don't want to overstep your bounds, but I think it is a nice gesture, especially when someone has been terminated, if you're able to provide them with some sort of verification of positive work.
And so you've let this person go. Now, how do you tell the rest of the team? Do you call them together in a meeting, send an email, say nothing? What's the best thing to do?
I think it depends on the situation. So if it's a termination for cause, I would typically recommend that we notify people on a need-to-know basis. We'd let their team know so that work can be reallocated. I would keep it to Joe is no longer with the company. We're going to work through a replacement. We wish him the best of luck, and circle everybody back around to the work. If it's a layoff situation in which you might have someone leaving through no fault of their own, it's just a change in the organizational structure or a change in the direction of the company. It's certainly not uncommon for an announcement to be made so that people have a chance to say goodbye to their colleague, that they know that it's okay for them to reach out to them. And certainly support or referrals from peers is always going to be helpful for someone in that situation. But again, I would consider the details around the termination as you're deciding how you message that.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision of whether or not to contest someone's unemployment filing?
Sure. Typically, I recommend that we allow the Unemployment Commission to make the call. When we contest would be if the information provided to the Unemployment Commission was inaccurate. And in those cases, I always recommend that you provide the correct information and allow the unemployment office to make the determination based on their rules for unemployment eligibility. It is not uncommon when someone is terminated, even for cause, that a company would agree not to contest unemployment. even if the original or originating reason might not qualify them for unemployment. It's not uncommon for employers to agree not to contest unemployment. It just assists them with a smooth transition. It lessens the likelihood that you will hear from them again going forward. Again, as smooth a transition as you can make for someone is always going to be better from a risk and liability perspective, because everybody's heard the old adage, desperate people do desperate things. If we're able to keep anyone from being in what they perceive to be a desperate situation, they are far less likely to be litigious following a termination.
Oh, this is good advice on a heavy topic. All right. So a lot of us are working in remote environments now. How do you adjust these steps? If you have an employee who's not coming into the office, how do you go through with this? Do you do it virtually? Do you call it in-person meeting? What do you recommend?
You can, it's been done all of the ways. You'll want to think through the person, the circumstances around the meeting. Zoom meeting is certainly appropriate. If that is your primary mode for meetings for your organization, it's certainly an appropriate way to meet with someone about their employment. Again, you'll want to think through technical security, how you're going to get it, how you're going to get your equipment back and all of those good things, but you can certainly do a Zoom meeting. A phone call is appropriate if that is the primary way that you communicate with someone and they are not local. If someone lives 10 minutes from the office and comes in 1 or 2 days a week, I would recommend, out of respect, that you give them the opportunity to come into the office and have the conversation face to face. But there's really no justification for forcing someone who never comes in to the office, works remotely 100% of the time, having them come into the office just so that you can terminate them.
Feel free to drop any other questions in the chat. One more quick question, Kelly, and this one might put you kind of on the spot. Can you role play a little bit of how to terminate somebody? You are welcome to terminate me.
Okay.
But can you kind of walk us through the script that you might use? And I can be terminated for cause.
Sure. Okay. So let me think of a real quick scenario.
Let's say you put me on a PIP and I haven't met my objectives. We've been meeting.
Yeah, we've done
working
several.
together.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So basically, you would come in, you'd sit down, sit across from you, and I would just say, "Good morning. I'm sorry that we're having to meet like this. However, you know that we've had some challenges with your performance and that we've been working really hard to try and get you up to speed, and we're just not getting there. And so unfortunately, we've had to make the decision to terminate your employment effective today. You need to know that this is where people shut down. So in the meeting, I'm going to continue talking. We recognize that this is probably a shock to you. And so, in exchange for this, we're going to pay out your PTO to the tune of X dollars. Your final paycheck will be paid on this date through whatever days you worked. Your benefits will last through the end of the month, and you'll receive COBRA paperwork in the mail, if that's applicable. You're more than welcome to apply for unemployment. We'll certainly not provide any negative information if someone attempts to do a reference, those types of things. I'm sure you have some personal belongings at your desk. Would you like us to pack those up for you and ship them to you? Would you like to come back after hours and get them? I know that this is probably a lot to take in. I'm not going to ask you to make this decision right now, but you do need to think about how you'd like to get your things. I'm sorry, I'm seeing these notes come up. So all of the last minute things that you want to make sure you've got, right? If they have collect their badge, collect their keys, any desk keys, things like that. Anything that goes to the office, you'll want to collect that. Again, they're going to be flustered. So do not be surprised if they give you some stuff and get home and realize they still have, you know, the key to another room in their pocket. If they have a laptop that's at home or a printer that we purchased for them when they work remotely, those types of things will need to be picked up. Certainly would discuss that. 15-20 minutes max for this meeting. And then at the end, I would simply say, you know, do you have anything at your desk that you need right now in order to get home? If so, I can escort you to your desk to get it. And if not, then, you know, I'll escort you to the front. Do you have any questions for me? They usually don't, because again,
So overwhelmed.
they're still on the first sentence.
This is a fake firing and my palms are sweating.
Yeah, it's right. And so we certainly want to provide them all of the information that they're entitled to, but plan to have to repeat it, because there's an excellent chance that they did not hear all of the details that they need to assist with their transition.
So we've got a question in the chat. I think one of the things we always hear as managers is South Carolina is an at-will state. So is there ever a time when you can or should terminate an employee without cause?
There's a lot of reasons. And remember, at will just says that you can terminate someone for any reason or no reason, as long as the reason is legal, right? So the at will classification doesn't give us the right to terminate someone in a protected class for a protected reason, right? So recognizing then that we're only terminating people for legal reasons, and sometimes it's no reason. Sometimes this person is just not a good fit for the team, and it's impacting 4 other people's work, and it's just not something we can allow to continue. That's a completely legal reason to have someone move on from your organization. And that would be a perfect example of a no-fault termination.
That's definitely challenging to navigate. Any other last minute questions as we wrap up and prepare to pass the baton?
Thank you all for your time this morning.
Well, Kelly, this was certainly a heavy start to the morning, but I'm glad we got it out of the way so we can go have fun now.
Yes, I get to the light stuff.
Yeah. If y'all are like me, you already feel better knowing that we figured out how to, that we can make hard choices and do hard things, but we can do them with dignity and with tact and compassion. And bringing those same values that we serve our clients and communities with to our employees. So let's see. Next, we are moving to my good friend, Steve Holl. And Steve is with Find Great People. And if you have not worked with Find Great People, you might not have worked in the nonprofit sector very long, because Find Great People is probably the best known search firm. And we've got some questions about hiring for our poll. Forgive my typo as this launches. I did these pretty quick. So let us know, how many positions do you think you'll be filling between now and the end of the calendar year? We're really curious to see. Do you think you're holding your workforce steady, or are you going to be making a significant number of new hires? Let's see if this is in line with what we're seeing across the way, and we're seeing lots of responses come in. We're going to give this, maybe 15 more seconds before we show you the results. And then we will turn it over to Steve to talk about recruiting. And here we go. I'm going to share the results with you. It looks like most people, almost half of folks look like they're going to be hiring between 1 and 3 new positions before the end of the year. And then everything else is kind of mixed. For those of you who hope to not have to make any new hires before the end of the year, I am right there with you. It is certainly a lot of work to be hiring right now. And so I'm really glad that we can be with Steve today and learn a little bit more about the recruitment market and what's happening out in the field. And what to expect if you are one of our friends who is looking to make that big decision, that big investment. One of the most expensive choices that we make as employers is hiring. And so, Steve, I'm getting your slides pulled up. If you want to introduce yourself officially, and I will get things moving.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much, Mary Dell, and good to be with all of you. I'd say see all of you, but I don't see most of you. So hopefully you're all doing well. I do want to highlight, if you looked at your poll, about 85 to 87% of you said, I'm hiring or I'm going to hire. And that reflects what's going on throughout the country for sure. Brief introduction. So Steve Holl with Find Great People. I'm actually in my 33rd year with the firm. And so I started in 1989 as a college senior. We had a team of 7 back then, and now we have a team of 105. So dramatic growth, really mostly in the last 20 years. And my role is vice president, which basically means I get to do anything that someone needs help with. So I started my career for the first 15 years as a headhunter, recruiting technology professionals, mostly in the Southeast. And then as the company grew, so did I, and moved into leadership roles. And for the last 13 years, most of my role has been on the client development side, but I'm actually leading or trying to help lead 6 or 7 different searches right now with key clients. So basically I do whatever is needed and I speak often. So with that said, let's move to the next slide. Mary Dell had asked that I give those of you who maybe are not familiar with us just a couple of helpful understandings of who we are. And so at FGP, we actually do 3 things. We find talent, so that's the recruitment side. And since we've been in business for 40 years, that's what mostly we are commonly known as. However, many of you may not be familiar with the fact that for the last 15 years, we do a lot of consulting work, mostly through human resources and through outplacement. So we help our clients develop and we help them transition talent. I've even had to fire a few of our own clients' employees. So I understand the angst that we just had in that last session. Okay, next slide. And then as far as a firm, in our 40-year history, we've actually recruited and placed people in 45 of the 50 United States, 14 countries, and throughout 26 different industries. That's just in recent years. However, it was about 13 years ago that we started a nonprofit specialty search practice. And as a result of that, we have completed over 700 searches, and that's throughout 19 different states. And as you can see here, we've got just a listing of some of the roles that we typically are hired to recruit on. As you'll notice, almost all of these are going to be executive, senior leader, or management level roles and above. However, we do have a staffing division that actually works on roles that are beneath that are individual contributor roles. Okay, next slide. All right, so let's dive into the information. So what I thought I would do is let's start with the state of the national labor market. Just before we logged on, I got a few things from South Carolina, which are not on the slide, so I'll highlight those as we move along. So let's talk about the national unemployment rate. You may be familiar with the fact that we're at 3.6. This is as of April, most of these figures. So that's about 5.9 million people that are unemployed. And this is really, really close to what life was like right before the pandemic hit in March of 2020. Now in South Carolina, our unemployment rate actually just dropped. This just came my way today. And so we're actually at 3.3%. So we're well beneath the national average as of April's numbers. And then you've got 11.5 million jobs that are open nationally. And I've just highlighted that this is about the highest we've seen since the 1970s. Some of you weren't born yet. Some of us were definitely born. And That's a long time since we've had that kind of job growth. But just to look at the two different numbers, right? 5.9 million unemployed, but 11.5 million open jobs. So that equation is upside down, and that's putting pressure and creating some of the labor shortages that we're dealing with. And then compensation is rising. I don't know if that's a surprise to you. I hope it's not a shock. That's been going on really for the last almost 2 years. And the hourly earnings have increased, but I can tell you from a professional level, annual salaries are really through the roof. I'm not sure that I see that curbing anytime soon. And then labor force participation rate. So this is an important number because this tells us how many people are actually able to work and are working. In South Carolina, some good news to report, although it's not major, but we did have an uptick just recently. The numbers came out to 57.3% in South Carolina. So the good news is that we now have, as of, since March and April, we have a new high of labor force participation in South Carolina. And we're at 2.3 million people in the state who are working. A key indicator here to pay attention to is we have a population of about 5 million, 5.1, 5.2 million people. That includes all living and breathing human beings, including children. It does not include animals. Obviously, that number would be higher. And then the Great Resignation. I would love to see a show of hands, but I can't see your faces. If you've not heard of the term, the Great Resignation, I do want to kind of wonder where you've been for the last year and a half. Basically, it's over 40 million. I don't know the exact number. I think it's 41, 42 million people last year alone who voluntarily resigned their positions. And that's across all sectors and all states. And you have to sort of say, what in the world was going on? And one little statistic that caught my eye was the fact that the majority of those that voluntarily quit their jobs last year, between the ages of 30 and 45, that was the actual highest number of population that resigned. And I find that interesting because in the higher age category, the baby boom, that number actually declined for resignations. And in the 20 to 25, 25 to 30-year-old ranges, those numbers decline. So what's going on? And I would just tell you that, honestly, people feel burned out. Thankfully, we don't have the lockdown pressure that we have had in 20 and 2021, but that was a big driving component of this. Individuals that lived in states that had a much tighter restriction on the lockdown effect really was starting to have its impact. And so that's a big deal. And we have not seen that since. And in January, we actually had 4.3 million people resign. That's the latest number I've found. So all that points to the labor shortage. And you might say, well, what's the reasoning behind that? And I would just tell you, this is really more of a demographic problem than it is an economic problem. Even last night on the national news, I was listening to a federal official indicating that the economy is actually quite strong. And I believe that it actually probably is quite strong. We're just being hit with some other factors like inflation that's really impacting all of us on a day-to-day basis. And so when I talk about it being a demographic problem and why we have a shortage, the issue really stems from the fact that my parent generation, the baby boomers, they had fewer children, so fewer of my generation. I'm on the very front end of the Gen Xers. There are just fewer of us in number compared to the baby boomers. And then when you start multiplying all the resignations for retirement of the baby boomers, now we have a mathematical formula that's creating a problem. And we don't really catch up too much until we get to the millennial generation. By 2025, just in a couple of years, 70% of our workforce is going to be comprised mostly of millennials with a little bit of the Gen Zs coming in. And then by 2030, 90%, 80 to 90% of our workforce in the US will be made up mostly of millennial and Gen Z, and that's because I'm going to be retired, I hope, by that point. So this is a demographic problem, and that just simply means this labor shortage is not going to go away. If anything, if we happen to fall into an economic downturn, which prognosticators are forecasting, I would just tell you, it'll slow the problem down, but it's not going to actually resolve the problem, in my view. Next slide. So, when surveyed, 72% of nonprofit leaders are citing recruitment and retention as a big problem. And if you just take Mary Dell's anecdotal poll from the very beginning of our program in our session here, with 85%-ish plus or minus of this group saying, yeah, we're hiring, it's no surprise that this is a big problem that we're trying to fix. Next slide. So let's talk about the nonprofits more specifically. Some of this data was from an organization that surveyed over 400 nonprofits nationally. So in 2021, so this is a little bit outdated, but I'm going to help us with some new numbers. In 2021, turnover rate of 21%, that's per the 400 that responded to that survey that were in the nonprofit sector. And I'll just say, folks, that's a really high number. National averages around probably 10 to 12%. And that's considering all industry sectors. I did find this fact this morning. There are 1.8 million nonprofit organizations in the United States, of which almost all of you would fit into that category. The Society for Human Resource Management, their surveys indicate that out of the nonprofit sector, turnover rate was a little lower more recently to 19%. So I don't know if we should pat ourselves on the back terribly much, but at least it was going in the right direction. And then these two numbers really caught my attention. 60% of nonprofit leaders, hopefully most or many of you are nonprofit leaders, 60% of those surveyed nonprofit leaders said that they felt used up at the end of every day and overworked. And then even more concerning in my view, which lends itself to this labor shortage continuing, 75% of them said that in the next 15 years, so on one hand, that seems like an eternity, but I can tell you it's going to go quick. 75% said in the next 15 years, they're planning to leave the nonprofit space or retire altogether. My experience in working with nonprofits over the last 13 to 14 years heavily is that nonprofit group does not do a very good job of succession planning. And so basically we have people my age or a little bit older that are planning to move out. And the question is, what do you have behind you that's going to step up and take over? And that's a big problem. 79%, nearly 80% of those surveyed said talent acquisition was a big priority. And that goes hand in hand with our earlier poll of 80 to 85% of you saying I need to hire, and then other data that I've seen out there. And then of those surveyed, 50% haven't budgeted enough money toward their HR recruitment process or needs. And I'll give you a real life example. I just started a new board assignment last week. I'm going to keep the name private, not to embarrass anyone, but it's a major organization. It's a privilege to be on their board. However, in my first board meeting, the budget was front and center, and they are 8 staffers behind. They have 8 open positions, and they're trying desperately to get a budget approved in order to get themselves back in line so that they can provide the services that the organization was created to do. And so I get that. But if you haven't been budgeting enough money, I think you need to consider ramping that up. And I'm not exactly sure how to help you solve that today. Almost 70% of the nonprofits surveyed said they don't have a strategy for how to go about recruiting and retention. I've listed here sourcing, engaging, developing, and retaining. In some ways, you can look at the internet and you can find anywhere from 4 elements of talent management up to about 12 elements. And so I didn't have room to put 12. So I just tried to summarize this for you. But sourcing would be the identifying of talent on the front end. How do we engage them in conversation? Once we get them on board, how do we develop them? And then lastly, how do we keep them? And then last on this slide, 50%, half said they really need to strengthen interviewing skills and processes. What I'm finding in the nonprofit sector is that our leaders are spending a lot more of their time having to fundraise, probably what they'd rather not do. And if they don't have the staff to go out and specialize in fundraising, then they've got to do that. And they're just not able to give their time and attention to the front door of this process, which is the recruitment of talent, much less the back door, which is keeping them from leaving. Next slide. All right, so this is really my last slide, and I have no idea how we're doing on time, Mary Dell, but you have not shut me down yet, so we're good. So some recruiting tips, right? So let's not just identify that we have a problem. What can we do about it? Nearly 60% of candidates in the workforce that have been polled, they point to having a poor interview experience as a turnoff. And my response to that is, folks, let's not make this very hard. I mean, you might just say, well, what does that mean? Poor interview experience. Well, it can be pretty basic stuff like, hey, I actually sent in an application and I never heard back. In this labor short market, we can't afford to do that. Even if the answer is thanks, but no thanks. You ought to be responding to people when they apply at the very least. It would include very poor communication after an interview process. I've had individuals tell me they've been through the whole interview process, meaning multiple interviews. So you're starting with a virtual probably, then you're moving maybe to a second virtual, then you're moving to an in-person if that's how your organization is set up. And then they just don't hear back. Did I get the job? Did somebody else get selected? And again, I sit here and say, if they've been through the interview process, that's probably only a handful of candidates, if that. And you're not helping your reputation by not responding to them and just giving them a reason why you're moving on. It's basic. In other cases, I've had individuals say they've been on interviews, and when they showed up, nobody knew what they were there for. They didn't even know that there was an interview going on. And again, I think that's comical. Patsy, I see you smiling, shaking your head, Patsy Sawyer, and I'm with you. It's like, how in the world is that possible? The front desk did not even know to expect somebody for an interview. Now, if it's a confidential search, then please don't do it on site. Go to a Starbucks or have lunch somewhere or meet in a park or something. Don't do it in front of your team. But there's really no excuse for your team, at least those who need to be in the know, knowing that you've got an interview. And so what happens is a leader on the team brings the candidate in and says, you know what, I don't even know what we're hiring for. What are you applying for? I mean, that's just awful. And that's making this really hard for people. So that's the first tip. Number 2, create a compelling position profile. And I think you might be saying, Steve, what in the world are you talking about? Or what's a position profile? Well, that's AKA job description, okay? Because most of us are going to post and pray. And I say all the time, prayer is a wonderful thing. I'm good with that. But just think about the job posting concept. When I was a younger man in this business, we used classified ads in the newspaper. And some of you may remember that. Others of you are wondering what in the world I'm talking about. Well, let me just tell you, if you walk by a store today, a retail store, and you see a help wanted sign in the window, you're doing that electronically. I actually pulled up to my dry cleaners the other day, and for the first time, I saw a help wanted sign in decades. And I thought, what in the world is going on? The problem is that whether it's a sign in the window or a posting on the internet, an individual has to be walking by literally or figuratively by that posting and spot it or be looking for it in order for them to be able to apply. And so if you're going to put a position profile job description out there, then talk about who your organization is. Let's put a little fluff on the front end of this. Let's boast about your organization, who we are, what our mission is, all the great things that we do. And then let's go into the duties and responsibilities. But even more than that, let's be sure and help them understand what we expect this position to accomplish. It's one thing to say, I need you to raise money. It's another thing to say, we need to raise $500,000 over the next year and a half, or whatever the numbers are. And so be very specific on what it is that this individual has to be able to do. That might cut down on your getting some applicants that really aren't qualified. And then third, your compensation. We've already talked about that, rising wages. Well, just recent data this morning, South Carolina wages were up almost 4.5% over this time last year, over April, I should say, of last year. So that's just one indicator that wages are rising, but I'm telling you that not so much in the nonprofit sector, but in the corporate sector, we're seeing unbelievable counteroffers for people not to leave their jobs. And I'm talking about to the tune of sometimes $30,000 to $50,000 increase in current comp just to keep an employee. So we're not going to see that kind of thing too much on the nonprofit side, but I would say to you, you can't just simply say, well, we're a nonprofit, we can't pay well. You've got to figure out a formula for that, and that may mean more fundraising to help with this problem. But when there's a labor shortage like what we have, compensation is going to be one of those key metrics that an individual candidate is going to be looking for. And then fourth, whether you're remote fully or whether you're a hybrid, culture is still the king. And I would argue that if you're fully remote or if you're partially hybrid, culture is even more importantly the king and queen of the equation. I'm grateful that at our firm with 105 team members that we are probably 90 to 95% in the office. It's not mandated. I'm grateful that our team wants to be together, right? That's encouraging. That being said, we have a nonprofit client that we're dealing with right now where everyone is 100% remote all over the country. And the challenge is, how do you actually create a culture that is unique to that organization? And that takes real intentionality. And that takes an awful lot of these kinds of virtual calls and meetings to keep people connected. Otherwise, you're asking for people to leave your organization. You're giving them permission in ways that you maybe aren't thinking. And then the last bullet point, and this is really my favorite tip. How many of you are talent spotting? And you might say, never heard the term. And I would say, okay, great. I'm glad I introduced it to you. Talent spotting is looking for talent before you need it. You may have heard of a book on networking called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty, right? There's no point in digging your well once you're completely dry. At that point, you won't have the strength or energy to dig that well for water. So you need to be talent spotting before you need the talent. In other words, if you're at the grocery store, if you're at the dry cleaner, if you're at the post office, if you're going to a dinner at a hotel and you're in the lobby or you're in the elevator with somebody you've never met before, pay attention to who's around you and ask questions, introduce yourself. The reason for that is because you're far better off if you find somebody that amazes you and your biggest challenge is, I don't have an opening. Well, guess what? Now we're talking about top grading. That's another term that you need to be familiar with. I have a full deck. I have no empty chairs on the Titanic. Every spot is completely filled. Well, now I have the luxury of assessing, do I have A players, B players, or C players? And every one of us has a mixture of all three of those. The goal is to be overloaded on the A and the B and not on the C. And most of us who are leaders admit that we'll spend probably most of our day focusing on the C players because we can't trust that they're going to do their work and get it done efficiently, timely, and with passion. So why keep the C's? Let's be looking for people to replace the C's, and let's get some more A's and some more B's on the team. And in order to do that, you have to be looking always, and you need to be looking under every single rock. Please don't rely on job postings to do this very important function for you. All right, I'm done, Mary Dell. So that's my pitch, and I'm sticking with it.
I love it. Do we have any questions for Steve? I love that you wrapped with a perfect segue to our next presenter. But before we let Steve go back to his busy day, I'm kind of jealous. You can go out and get a cup of coffee with a coworker just by stepping outside your door. And here I am at home by myself.
I don't know if you heard, but I got a bunch of teammates that are yelling just down the corner from me, and I have no idea what's going on. But I imagine it's probably something positive that they're celebrating, and that's encouraging.
There must be donuts.
Well, then in that case, I'll stay seated.
Any books you would recommend on talent management strategy?
I don't have any books on that. I'm not the most prolific reader. I will tell you, since you asked me about a book, I'm going to tell you about one book that made a humongous difference in my career. Years ago, we were on a family vacation to Hilton Head, and I don't know why, but I got the notion to go down to Barnes and Noble and find a book to read at the pool. And I found the book that just changed my trajectory when it comes to networking, professionally networking. And it's called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. And I have basically deployed his principles for the last, I think we're probably 15 years in now. When we do outplacement and career transition with individuals that are in between their positions, I highly recommend that book. It's really all about the principle of helping other people get what they need before you get what you want and maybe even deserve sometimes. And so I spend a lot of my time introducing other people to people in my network, and it just pays huge dividends. There's a tremendous satisfaction, right? It's a humanitarian thing, but more importantly, it helps me and my firm get known well before I would ever meet somebody. And so I just highly recommend that book, period.
Great recommendation. All right, we are transitioning to switch over to one of my new favorite people, Kat Leitner with Allora Solutions, to talk about retention strategies. And so I'm going to launch this quick poll as we start switching. Do you have a retention strategy? Let us know. And as you get your get the questions in, Kat, I see you've taken the screen. I'm so excited. Thank you for being with us today. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll close the poll and get started.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
All good.
Okay, good. Yes, so Kat Leitner here with Allora.
I think we lost her.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I don't know. My computer did not like when I tried to share my screen. So I'm going to try this one more time. Okay, let me try. Share screen. I think Zoom was angry at me.
Zoom is such a fickle friend.
He is, or she is, whatever Zoom might be. Since we're talking about HR, I won't go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, Kat Leitner with the Allora Solutions Group. Hope everyone is having a great morning. I'm so glad to be here. My business partner and I, Ashley Metherell, we started Allora Solutions Group back in February of 2018 after we had about combined almost 20 years of experience in the operations field. Ashley is the queen of our HR. I have extensive background in recruiting and retention and development. And then for Allora, I handle the majority of our people and process projects. So I'm excited to talk about retention. I've been set up very well this morning, hearing from our other speakers. And there is a strategy behind it, or there should be. So,
Uh-oh. Oh my gosh. Kat, your computer's getting mad, but I am going to take this quick minute to plug how important this is as we share our poll and show that fewer than 20% of our folks have a retention strategy in writing. And so knowing that 80% of us are kind of between having something formal or just haven't had time to think about it, I know this is critical for all of us to get some education on. You there, Kat? Kat, where'd you go?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can barely hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I put you on my hotspot and let's hope we get through this. If not, I will come back. I don't know why you can't see me, but I am here. So I'm going to keep going. But there needs to be a strategy behind your retention policies and how to do this. And so I'm excited to go
through that with you today. And so I'm just going to dive in. Our business is your business, and that's as plain as simple as we explain what Allora does. We are here to help you build your operations, and part of that is your HR needs. And if you do not have adequate HR systems and policies, as well as systems and policies around your workday and your marketing and your planning needs, your team is going to get frustrated. So that's why we look at, an HR, a critical part of the operational process there. Like I said, our story, Ashley and I met literally at the water cooler at our old job. We joke around, but we were the two weird girls that always talked about systems and processes, and we loved HR, and we loved, marketing, and there was not many of us in the office that did. We had the opportunity to leave our current roles and branch off with our bosses at the time and start a wealth management firm from the ground up. We did that in 2.5 months. I opened 6 offices in the Southeast within 6 months, and I don't recommend doing that. I don't know if we slept. I don't know if we still sleep now, but it was a great learning opportunity. And that's really when our eyes kind of opened and we said, okay, we can do this for a lot of people. And there is a need in the workplace for outsourcing, and you just simply can't know everything. So this is my business partner and I. So what do we believe? We believe that when business gets better, life gets better. And we believe that not only from the business owner, but we believe that from everybody from the receptionist to a salesperson on up to a C-level suite. When your business and your job is working smoothly and efficiently, life is just better. I mean, I'm just going to call it what it is. You feel better. You're not stressed. You're not anxious. Things just work out. What people think we do, as you all know, sitting here, it's like, oh, HR is so scary and frightening, and especially in the nonprofit world, there's a lot of unknowns. HR really just comes down to one thing, and it's about growth, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Is what that means for you and your business. And at the end of the day, bottom line, everything in HR, especially when you're talking about retention and keeping your top candidates, it comes down to communication. So as we all sit here today, what can leaders do? So we like to refer to it as our growth method. And we'll start with G, and that is get aligned. And if your team, if your staff is not on the same page, is not aligned with where the business is going, where the nonprofit goals are, where, looking at donors and fundraisers, et cetera, you are going to have mass chaos and people are not going to be on board long term. So that is number one thing to do. I highly encourage you, start in the recruitment process. When you sit down and have your first conversation with a potential new team member, let me tell you about our goals and how you can fit into these. And here's the bigger vision. There always has to be a vision and a mission. And I encourage you to speak about those daily. So important. This is also, these are our two work dogs. I have to point them out. Margot is the small one. Gracie is the big one. And they are both service animals. So they go with us everywhere to our clients' offices. They're like our little therapy dogs. So R is recognize opportunities. When you are sitting down having conversations with your team members, recognize that everything is not sunshine and roses at times, and ask questions. Again, goes back to communication. What are some opportunities that I as a manager or I as a company or this nonprofit can get better? What are some opportunities that we as a whole team can work more efficiently and effectively to make your life easier? You know, that should be a goal of all of ours as nonprofit leaders, to say, how can we as a unit make our staff more efficient and more effective in their everyday task? So recognize that, again, nothing's perfect. There's always room for opportunities and growth, and have the conversation. O is my favorite. Optimize your operations. Again, in order to keep and retain top employees, they have to see the bigger vision. They have to be able to manage their teams. They have to be able to operate these systems and processes, whether that is putting together grants, or whether that is fundraising. You have a large corporate gala. How do we put together systems and processes to make everyone's life easier so they don't get burned out? I feel that's one thing that we work with our nonprofits the most, is people just get burned out. It is a hard role sometimes, whether you're in development or whether you are in, we work with a handful of nonprofit animal shelters. Talk about burnout. And sometimes it's more mental than anything. So I know for us, we have brought in some therapists to our nonprofits we work with, just as an extra bonus. Like, hey, we have someone coming in on site every Friday. You know, they're here to just chit chat with you if you want it. But seeing hundreds of animals being dropped off every week and some not making it, messes with your mind. Same with, you know, nonprofits that work with children or anyone. So think outside the box on what else you can do that might not be an extra salary or a bonus, but having someone there that someone can talk to on a Friday might be what it takes to keep someone around. So always think about, how can we optimize what we're doing in our day-to-day to maybe be an extra perk. Another thing that we always suggest is asking, you know, like, hey, sitting down, we can't give you a raise this year. Like, you know, it's just, it is what it is. But there are some other things that we might be able to do. What would you like to see happen? What would be a perk to you that would make you really excited? Is that a monthly gym membership? You know, $10 a month, that's doable, more than $1,000 raise, you know. Is that a cell phone stipend? Are you on your cell phone all the time? Can we help you that way? We have a client that one of their staff members was not standing up and vocalizing what was really bothering her. So we sat her down and we said, you know, let's talk about this. There's something going on. Again, we just had a conversation. And it came down to, she was really not happy with her desk chair, and it was causing her back to be in the worst pain of her life. And she just did not feel like she could say, hey, is there any way I could get a better desk chair? My back is killing me. And we were like, let's fix that. If that is what's going to, you know, make you feel better, we're going to get you a better chair. We're going to get you a heating pad. And then fast forward a month, she reaches out and she's like, I can't tell you how much this one heating pad and this new chair has helped me and has transformed, you know, my workday. And that's all it took, was a desk chair. So again, it comes down to communicating, asking the right questions, and thinking about, okay, well, I might not be able to give you a $10,000 raise, but a desk chair I can do. So W, what are your wins? We always ask our leaders to celebrate wins. I think that's such a, you think about it, you're like, yeah, we celebrate, but do you really? Do you actually sit down with your team and say, okay, for this week, here's our goals. And then come Friday, did we reach our goals? How are we going to celebrate those? If you have your annual gala and your goal is to raise $150,000 and you raise $150,000.02, how are you going to celebrate that? And you have to celebrate with the team, encourage your mid managers. I always like mid managers to do this, to sit down with staff and say, how do you like to be acknowledged? Some people are like, don't want it. Some people are like, yes, I want you to praise me in front of a room of 100. Some people just need a pat on the back. Some people need a gift card to Chick-fil-A for lunch. You have to engage with your staff to know how they would like to celebrate and how to win. Because I can tell you my celebrations are, I like a massage and I like to be by myself and I don't want people to talk to me because people talk to me all day. So that's how I celebrate my win. But my business partner, she's like, no, let's go out to dinner and have 4 bottles of wine. Totally different. We like to celebrate different, and that's okay. You just need to know how to celebrate with your team, because at the end of the day, again, you're talking about one vision. How are you getting there? You have to stay focused on the goals, and your team has to see how to get there. If they don't, they're going to be unhappy, unfulfilled, especially those that are willing to work in the nonprofits. And I don't want to use the word sacrifice because that's not the right word by any means, but be willing to work their tails off, because all of y'all do. How do they stay motivated to continue and push forward and not get burnt out? And then the T, transform the company. So this is a fun one because this one is not something that happens overnight. And I always encourage, especially our nonprofit clients, like nothing happens overnight, other than maybe, I always use the analogy of a flower blooming. It takes weeks, months sometimes, but it every little night you go outside and you check the growth on your flowers or your vegetable garden, and you have a little bit more and a little bit more, then a little bud, then a little, sprout, shop. So anyway, everything takes time. Write it all out. This is our retention plan. We are going to start by just having annual reviews, or maybe it's like just a monthly conversation, and the nonprofit leader says, okay, I'm going to start department by department, and I'm going to take each staff member to lunch every Friday, and I'm just simply going to say, how are you? How is your personal life? How is your family? Just kind of build that connection there, because that's when those staff members say, wow, she really cares. Lunch. Can you hear me? Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep, you're back.
Okay, sorry. But that's really how you're going to build those connections with your team and start to see the transformation. When you start having conversations and start building those relationships, and that's the key to retention. Conversations, relationships. And then the next is, again, I can't say this word enough, is H, have the conversations. You just have to talk. I mean, it is what it is, and it seems so silly to say that, but have annual reviews, have monthly conversations, and listen. I know that's so hard, and it's hard for me sometimes, but I will write down on my sheet of paper when I'm meeting with somebody, just listen. And it is something as simple as what I want to,
like, let's go back next week. What worked really well? And in your opinion, what do we need to change? There's no harm in saying, hey, I don't know all the answers, because there's not anyone in the world that does have all the answers. You look at our government, we have the president, vice president, and the cabinet members. If we just thought that one person knew all the answers, we just would have a president, but that's not the case. So always have conversations. And as someone was saying earlier about, even the hard conversations, most of the time when we are having hard conversations, we work ourselves up and it's just all mental, and it's, it's really in our minds a hard conversation, but it might not be that bad. Or if you're going in to tell someone, hey, this really is not working, 9 times out of 10, they probably are going to know too. Like, they know what's coming. So don't take yourself out, just start the conversation. And remember, other than maybe one time when someone threw a trash can at me, that's the worst thing that could happen. So that is that. And then again, we preach it every day. Your operations is the key to skyrocket your business. You have to have strong people, to have a strong systems and processes, to have a strong need for planning. And that's where you, as a nonprofit, can skyrocket your business. But it starts with your people. You cannot do everything alone. I hope that helped.
That was great, Kat. Do you have time for a quick question or two?
I have 9 minutes, so we are
Okay.
good.
All right. So what are you hearing about specifically nonprofits maybe using signing or retention bonuses?
Yeah, so we definitely see it. The tricky part about, like, I'll just start with the signing bonus, is you just don't know what will happen. That is a leap of faith in a candidate for a signing bonus. I would say they would have to come from a lot of experience for me to suggest having a signing bonus. It would have to be the perfect storm, and especially in the nonprofit world, I think if you are headhunting, going out and be like, that is our director of development, we want her, she has a proven track record of success. That's a little different than finding somebody on Indeed that might be in the marketplace for a new job. I think there's a time and a place, but you just have to be really careful and put stipulations in there. If you do not stay with the organization for 3 months, you owe this back. I would always encourage you to think big picture, think worst picture, and plan. You plan for the worst, and you're probably going to get the best, but just make sure you're covered.
That's great. All right. So here's a bit of a maybe more challenging question to navigate. One of the things we hear is we'll hear our CEOs and managers say, I am killing myself. Like I am just taking bullets for my team. I am putting myself out there. They don't know how hard I'm working to make sure we hit the budget, to make sure that we can keep them all employed. Like I'm working so hard and getting a little bit burnout. And then on the team member side, you might hear, my pay is just not up to market rate. I like my job, but I don't love it. There's these couple things that get on my nerves. But it's hard for the CEO sometimes to hear some of those recommendations from the team because they feel like they are doing so much already. Do you have any recommendations for helping to navigate that divide between your leadership and your frontline team members?
I do. It comes down to communicating. And I would say in that instance, they need to have a weekly meeting and with everybody and say, okay, here's what, and go around the room. What was your win last week? What was your opportunity? And talk about what everyone's doing. And it doesn't have to be, a 4-hour meeting. Don't get me wrong, because no one has time for that. But we all need to do a good job of communicating what is on our agenda, what we, what was our win. That's how I like to say what was accomplished. And then what's an opportunity, because you never know who around that table, let's just say your opportunity is like, yeah, I am planning for our upcoming gala and I'm having a hard time of finding a good caterer. Okay. So you never know who might be sitting around that table that their brother owns a catering company, so if you say my opportunity for this week is I got to find a caterer that's within our budget. Well, Sally across the table says, oh, well, I can help you with that, but if that was not made clear and apparent, you're not going to know. Just like, in your scenario, the, frontline leaders having a problem and getting burned out because they are going out and burning both candles at the end trying to fundraise. Well, who knows? Someone might not have that much of a workload and can say, well, I can come help you. I'll take a Friday and come help you. You just have to communicate. And it comes down to over communication. That's really it.
Over communication. You're right. I think about those situations when I've been in them, and I think that's probably always the most critical is you always underestimate how much you're actually communicating.
Yes, agreed.
Well, thank you for being with us today, Kat, and talking about retention. So we've hit a lot of the high points, and now we are going to launch a final poll question, I think, about onboarding. Before we turn it over to Sharon Middleton McGhee of HR Cares RX. And Sharon is a member also of our consulting collab. And I've got this question launched. So tell us about your onboarding strategy. Is it in writing? You're updating it all the time? It's in writing, but you haven't had time to dust it off the shelf lately. It's in your head and you wish you had time to put it in writing, or you just haven't gotten around to it yet. Maybe you're a one-person shop and thinking about growing. Tell us what's going on with your onboarding strategy. And with that, I'm going to give us a couple more seconds to respond to this poll question. We'll share the answer and then turn it over to Sharon to take it away. I hope y'all are having as much fun as I am so far. I'm learning a lot. This is a lot of information. We're having a quick little mini conference here in this 2 hours. All right, we've got a pretty good participation rate. So I'm going to share the poll with you. And it looks like we're pretty all over the map. So some folks have got that onboarding schedule regularly updated. And then it's pretty well split between needing to be dusted off or needing to be put on paper. And so I know that we're all in a great position to benefit from what Sharon has to share from her extensive HR experience and career. And with that, Sharon, I will let you take it away.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I am Sharon Middleton McGhee, and I guess I need to, you're going to transfer it for me, Mary Dell, so I can do the PowerPoint.
You should have the power to share.
Okay, let's see.
There we go.
There we go. Cool, thank you. All right, so I guess it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Middleton McGhee, or Sharon McGhee. Most people know me by Sharon McGhee. I am the president and founder of HR Cares RX. As Steve talked about earlier, the Great Resignation. I was part of the earliest part of the Great Resignation. I spent over 20 years working at Charleston International Airport. About 16 of those years, I worked as the HR director there. And then my last 7 years, I started working with minority women-owned businesses, helping them to do business with the airport. So doing a lot of diversity and equity inclusion work there. And December, I left the airport. January 1st, I went full-time with my HR consulting business. I provide HR on-call services to small businesses, nonprofits, and even government agencies. So I've been pretty busy the last 2 years, very, very excited. I thank Together SE for offering the opportunity to be able to speak to you this morning, just to kind of give you some best practices about what to do when you finally, after you spend all that money with Steve, right? Steve helped you recruit your rock star, that person that was just the best fit for your organization. You've interviewed them, you spent a lot of time interviewing, you spent a lot of money recruiting. Now it's time to bring them into the fold, right? Bring them into the family. So how do you do that where they feel welcome, they feel valued, they feel that, you know, what they bring to the table is what your organization needs, and it's a great match, it's a great fit. So we're going to talk about how to do that and then continue to help them feel a part of the organization. So we're going to put out the welcome mat. So here we talk about the importance of onboarding. And what is onboarding? You know, some organizations, they talk about orientation, right? And so what's the difference between orientation and onboarding? Well, orientation is just a small piece of the onboarding process. So onboarding is basically the key factor in attracting and retaining top talent, boosting productivity, and driving business growth. So I use my parent company, SLMM Enterprises, LLC, as an example in this presentation. So the first thing you kind of want to do is develop your process. Why are you having this onboarding process? What is it that you want to achieve with it? And this is just examples. So all these slides are just examples that you could possibly use as a part of your onboarding process as you either expand it or develop it because you don't have one yet. But this is just some best practices, some ideas that you can add in there. So do you want to, first thing is ignite your employees. Do you want them to be so excited to come to work every day, and you have specific goals for them? You have given them the vision, because we talked about vision and mission. Kat talked about that earlier. You've got your vision, your mission, you've explained that to them, you've shown them the excitement of it. You want them to get on board and get excited with you as well. So you want to drive employee engagement and develop, increase business growth. You want to build a team, you want to build a strong foundation for your new employees so they can be successful early on, because how you bring them in is kind of how they're gonna, go through the process. If you just kind of bring them in, you give them some paperwork to do, and you really don't nurture them, show genuine authenticity when you're interacting with them, it's just gonna be blah, but you want them to be excited because you have spent all this time and all this money to bring these people in, and then you're just going to give them a blah onboarding process, or just a piece of it, which is just the orientation. And then you may have some other goals that you want to set as a part of that onboarding process. What else is it that you want your new employee to feel? What is it that your organization wants to achieve? So we're going to talk about onboarding goals and the employee life cycle. So let's see, how to measure onboarding success. So the marks, or what we call benchmarks, of an engaged employee at SLMM Enterprises, LLC. So again, these are just examples. You can change it up however your organization deems necessary. So connection. Engaged employees are emotionally linked to their jobs. I know I looked forward to going to my job, and this job as well. I look forward to working because I have a connection with it. I love the work that I do. It gives me a sense of value. It gives me a sense of ownership. So I want to make sure whatever I put my hands to, that I do a great job. And it is also important to have a close relationship with my leader, my manager, my director. Relationship, we've heard that quite a few times today. Relationships are so vital in order for an employee to feel engaged and to feel wanted and needed. Think about that as you go when you're working and you're interacting with your employees or with your supervisors and your managers, having a close relationship is so vital and important because, again, it builds that connection. Committed employees, those employees that are engaged, that feel like their contributions are making a difference to the organizations and to the customers they serve, they're committed. They'll give you everything they've got when they're engaged. When they feel like, yes, management is listening to me, my supervisor cares about me, we'll talk about check-ins, that type of thing. When they feel like they're invested in me, I'm gonna give them all I got because they care about me, right? And they care about the work that I do. Because if I'm not committed, I'm going to look for another job. If you don't treat me like I'm valued, why am I, there's an old scripture that says you don't cast your pearls before swine. So why am I going to continue to waste my talent here when I'm not appreciated? And they will leave. And as Steve talked about earlier, the Great Resignation, that's why a lot of people left their jobs, because they didn't feel valued. Your contributions, engaged employees contribute autonomously. You don't even have to tell them what to do. If they know what their role is, you're giving them the job description, right, as part of the orientation, or even during the interview process, they should get a job description so they would know exactly what is required of them to be able to do the job successfully. And they understand where their efforts are best made. And then progress. Engaged employees show progress in their work. So they're going to track what they're doing. You as the manager, the supervisor, or the leader of the organization will track it. But an employee that's connected, that's committed, and that contributes will also track their processes. Kat talked earlier about wins. It doesn't matter how big or how small the win, still celebrate it. If they have buy-in, if they enjoy what they're doing, they feel valued, they're going to track their progress and they're going to be proud of what they've done. Because again, it's also going to be part of their professional development and also helping the organization as well. So this is an employee life cycle template. If anybody wants this presentation, I'll be happy to share it. I found this and thought it was like really cool. It gives you from the start, from the recruitment of the employee, the pre-boarding day, ramp up productivity, role, growth and role and transitions, and then offboarding. So this gives you the whole employee life cycle. It gives you the employee's actions, employee questions they may have during these specific phases of the cycle, what their emotional state may be, what the manager is responsible for doing during these different phases, processes, policies, tech, insight. So again, I think this is great, a great infogram of the beginning of the cycle to the ending of the cycle. So again, if you're interested in this presentation, I'd be happy to share it because I think this is very valuable information for an organization to know and to plan and to help plan. So compliance. So those dreaded forms we have to complete. The I-9s, the W-4s, you've got to get Social Security information. And a lot of this will happen on which day? The orientation day. It doesn't hurt to start some of the paperwork before they start working with you. The more paperwork they can get done before they start working with you. When the day one comes, you may have to go over a few things, complete some paperwork. But then the onboarding process, it continues because there's still a lot more things that need to be done if you want to keep that rock star you just hired. If you want to keep them engaged, if you want to keep them committed, if you want to keep them connected, get this stuff over and done early on so that you can spend more quality time with that new employee. We talked about pay periods and pay and pay periods. You'll probably go through the handbook. I highly recommend you go through the handbook at least the first day. I'm not talking about read it verbatim, but I highly recommend you go through the handbook the first day of employment. You don't want an employee to come to you later and say, well, you didn't tell me I couldn't do that. And I've seen that before. So, and it's important to make sure that your handbook is updated. If your handbook is more than 5 years old, I would even say 3 to 5 years old, it's time to have someone review your handbook and update it, because there are some new rules and regulations that probably have come out that is not in your handbook, or you may have some things in your handbook that shouldn't be in your handbook that you may have to adhere to if you have a situation that comes up. So, you know, there's some folks out there that can review your handbook if need be. A lot of HR people, consultants out there, if you don't have an HR department. Manager check-ins. So we talked about check-ins before. Here's a checklist of things to think about when you've got your new hire. Some companies have NDAs. An employee or a new employee would have to complete that. Work for hire explanation, we talked about job descriptions and compensation. It's important that, you know, when you hire that employee, that give them a letter. And I'm sure a lot of you probably already do that, you know, letting them know this is the job that you're being hired for. This is the grade, this is the pay, when are pay periods, the hourly rate, when is the start date, you know, that type of stuff. So it's important to have all that information in the offer letter when you give them the offer letter. Again, we talked about I-9s, W-4, Social Security numbers. It helps to have a checklist of everything that you have to have that new hire complete. I always use the new hire checklist. It allowed me to see, you know, what do I have, what don't I have, and what do I have to chase down the employee for? So always have a new hire checklist, and it just helps keep you on task, on point. We talked about the welcome letter. So when is their start date? What time do they need to show up? Where do they need to be? Dress code specifications. A lot of organizations really don't talk about dress codes. Back in the day, we had a dress code. And so it just depends on your organization and how you expect employees to dress when they come to work. Where to park, especially if you've got to pay for parking. What type of items do they need to bring to the orientation? You know, Social Security card, driver's license, you know, because you need some of that information for the I-9 passport, that type of thing. What are they going to do? What's going to happen that first day? And then you've got to plan with the employee onboarding schedule. What do you plan to do for the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? What are the goals that you're setting for that new employee? What will they have to have accomplished by 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Regular check-ins, that is a biggie. You do check-ins because you want to know how your new employee's doing, right? You want to show up, you want to say, hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything you need? Be genuine again, genuine and authentic when you're talking to that new employee. Let them know that you really care and you're really grateful and thankful that they're there. You hired them for a reason because you had a gap or you had a need. And so it does, I'm gonna tell you, a thank you can go a long way. Doesn't always have to be monetary. It doesn't always have to be a promotion or whatever, sometimes things can get a little rough. You can get really, really busy, and you're just thinking about what's going on. You may have some challenges or whatever. But when you see an employee go above and beyond, a thank you can go so far. It really can. Let them know you appreciate them and you appreciate them being there. Make sure they have the supplies and their work area is clean and it's ready for them to move in, because it's like, you're moving into a new house, right? When someone welcomes you into their home, they're going to take you on a tour of their house, because they're welcoming you to the family, or they're welcoming you to the home. So make sure you do that with your new employee, because that's kind of their new home, until. Make sure they have the right keys, codes, access to tools, and hopefully all of that has been done before your employee starts working. Setting up computers, software, subscriptions, emails, all of that. We talked about the handbook. Make sure they get the handbook and they sign the acknowledgement at the end saying they received the handbook. Doesn't mean they've read it, but they do have it. And you put that in their personnel file. And any other activities that you may need to have done with the new employee. Again, you go over the first day, first week expectations. We talked about the handbook, policies, procedures, perks, benefits, that kind of thing. Assign a mentor. You could assign a mentor, or, one time I created a buddy lunch program. I assigned a new employee with a buddy in their department. And so we would give them a certain amount of money, to take them to lunch or whatever. But they would spend the day with that employee just to show them around, show them how things operate, in the department and even in the organization. And you could do that, if you want to do it a couple of days, you could do it for a week, however you want it, however it works best for your organization. Review team organization, that org chart, pull that org chart, show them who is who and where they lie on that org chart. Company structure, where the new hire fits in. Again, we talked about those forms. Please give them a list of everything they need to bring that day one. And we talked about internet, doors, show them where all the doors are. They got to swipe in, that kind of thing. And the buddy would also show them how to do that as well. Again, we talked about checking in with the new hire, how they're adjusting, any questions, what are their obstacles. Make sure they know what your business is and what's so unique about your business. Educate them about who you are, what your mission is, what your vision is. Where do you look to be in year 1, 5, and 10 years? What is the organization's goals? How do they fit in to those goals? We talked about the acknowledgement of the employee handbook, and also remind them when their benefits end, and also make sure they get that information, the benefit information, in as soon as possible. Also, ask them how they feel so far about working with the organization. Again, how can you assist them? What are the current strengths of that employee? What do you see? What do you envision? Or if there's some weak areas, coach them or mentor them on how to possibly offer some areas of improvement and possible ways to improve. You notice I say coach and mentor. I believe in coaching and mentoring employees. You discipline them when you have to discipline them, but if you coach them early on, you may not have to discipline them later. You know what I'm saying? So just keep that in mind. Check in with your manager, evaluate the new hire's fit, the progress, strategize how to develop, again, the new hire's career success. Review the 4 areas of an engaged employee: connection, commitment, contribution, and progress. And again, this is just a checklist, but some ideas for you. So I use my name as a marketing manager. I know nothing about marketing, but here are the connection, the commitment, contribution, progress categories. And then under the have specific dates, which is your 30, 60, your 90 days. And what do you want them to accomplish, in their first 30 days? Also, you get to know your team and your role. First assignment, what's the goal? What is the key performance indicators? And then what are the next steps for the 60 days? Again, you do the same thing, same process. And then you evaluate in 90 days. You go through the same process. So it's some examples of email templates that you can send. Like for instance, for your new hire, you could say, hi there, tomorrow's your first day on the job. I wanted to be the first to welcome you. And it'd be nice to get this, from the CEO or from the manager or whoever. Just kind of letting them know, what the first day entails, and giving them the information of where they need to be at what time, those sorts of things, all the instructions. And then this is an example of an after offer email. Again, congratulate them on being selected for the position. You look forward to working with them and bringing them on as a great addition to the team. Can't wait to meet you, spend some time, get to know you, kind of even hear your thoughts about the organization, that kind of thing. And just give them sincere thoughts and compliments for your new team member, because remember, this is your rock star. You spent a lot of money to find this person and a lot of your time. So make sure that you treat them with respect and valued when you bring them aboard, because you really want to make them feel like a rock star, because they're going to perform the way you treat them. If you treat them as a rock star, they're probably going to perform as a rock star for you and make you proud. And then here is a sample email to send to the team to let them know that you have hired this rock star, and welcome them aboard when you meet them. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, Sharon, that was a lot of information, and we've got a lot going on in the chat. I think everybody is really excited about this. Folks are talking about using these charts and checklists and forms, and just how much of this we forget. Oftentimes, if you're the hiring person, you've been with an organization for a long time, and there are things that you just know without thinking that you forget that someone will need to be told specifically, like where to park, what door to go in, what kind of clothes to wear. Sure would be embarrassing to show up in a suit if everybody else is wearing jeans.
Oh, exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about E-Verify requirements and those kind of mandatory things that maybe if you're not an HR person, you might forget about?
Oh yeah, like for E-Verify, you have to do that within the first 3 days of hiring your new person. Try to get that done day one. If you can get that done day one, and they can bring in a passport or a birth certificate or a driver's license, social security card. At one time, you couldn't even tell them what to bring. It's just, you give the list of what documents they need to have to be able to verify their ability or authorization to work in the United States. So yeah, if you can get that paperwork done, at least, like I said, either before the first day or at least the first day, try to get it all done, those important documents, day one. Wow. And if you do a checklist, I'm telling you, the new hire checklist is amazing. If you if you need someone to create one for you, that, like I said, there's plenty of HR consultants here in the collaborative that we'd be happy to help you put that together.
We are coming up on 11:55. I want to thank those of you who have been able to spend this time with us today. I know it is a big commitment to this almost virtual conference that we've had time together today. A few things for housekeeping notes. I do want to remind everyone that Together SC has a compensation and benefits study that will come out later this summer. It's going to have great information around knowing the trends and typical ways that nonprofits navigate salary, benefits, and also coming out of COVID. And we know there will be a lot of critically impactful information there. So we are thinking of these sessions with awesome people like Sharon as almost a prep so that we can go ahead and get ready, go ahead and get our houses in order so that when this data comes out, we're ready to respond to it. I would also be remiss not to remind those of you who have stuck around to the end that if you are a member of Together SC, one of your benefits of membership is a free posting on our job board. And so if you have a job that is open now, please make sure that it's posted on the Together SC Career Center. You can reach out if you need the code for your free post. That resets on July 1st with the fiscal year. So you have like 35-ish days to use up your free post for this fiscal year before you get a new one next year. So please keep that in mind. It's a great place to target people who are specifically interested in working in the nonprofit sector. We highlight most of the jobs that get posted at some point through social media or through For Good Connections. And then my third housekeeping note is to encourage you to join our peer networks. If you're on the consulting side of things, our consultant collaborative has discussions like this very often. If you know somebody who's a consultant who works in the nonprofit sector, encourage them to join us. On the other side of things, we have an operations network that's amazing. I see Stig on here who helps to run that leadership team for our ops network. They host wonderful sessions like this for nonprofit leaders all the time. They have a great Slack channel where you can regularly share policies, information, and questions, get feedback on what's going on in your world. And then we have other peer networks for development, equity. We have a Black nonprofit leaders group, and many more opportunities for connection. So while it can be very lonely to be in your seat, please know that you're not alone. As long as you've got your Together SC membership, we're here for you and here to connect you with those out in the field doing the work. And thank you again. Thank you to Kat and Steve and Kelly and Sharon for sharing your expertise with us. Wow, you have poured so much knowledge into us today, and we are so grateful for that.